let's get to the playoff rankings because they were just revealed in the last hour. And boy, do I have some thoughts here. And judging by my screen right here to the immediate right of me, so do you. So the college football playoff rankings, I got them in my hand here. They're fresh off the presses. Jesse has been feverishly 5 states away from us up in Connecticut working on making the graphics. There you see the top 10. If you're watching on YouTube, it's Georgia, Bama, Michigan State, Oregon. That's your top 4. What an interesting field that would be right now. And then you got Ohio State, Cincy, Michigan, Oklahoma, Wake Forest, and Notre Dame. So that's your top 10. My initial thoughts here. I was surprised, just like the rest of you, that Oklahoma was all the way down at number 8. I don't necessarily have a huge issue with it, but I was surprised by it nonetheless. Now, obviously, that's kind of a moot point / mute point, depending on how much you want to emphasize the vowels there, because as we all know, Oklahoma's got several more opportunities coming up. If anything, this is a net positive, not only for college football, but it's a net positive for Oklahoma. I mean, Lincoln Riley, what have we talked about with Oklahoma the entire year? As we watch them sleepwalk after sleepwalk after sleepwalk, they don't come out of the gate hot enough. They don't play in second half or first halves the way they play in second halves. Well, if Lincoln Riley can't come up with something the old natural way, the good old-fashioned way in-house to motivate his team, just let that screen do it. Just let those committee guys do it. And so Oklahoma at 8, it doesn't hurt the Sooners. It may help them. But also, here's what I want to know. The standard that was used to push Oklahoma all the way down there to number 8, if that is maintained across the board, who's it going to cost? That's first. And then secondly, who's it going to benefit down the stretch? So I'll get back to that in just a second. The other thing I wanted to talk about right there in that top 5, I think it was, is Oregon is indeed over Ohio State. I was doing Big 12 radio today with Dusty and Eichert out there, and we were talking about that very thing, about whether the Ducks would be ahead of the Buckeyes. I am a believer that it would have made no sense to have it inverse, to have it the other way around. Because if you're a committee, and you want to pound the drum of head-to-head mattering, well, make it matter, first off. And secondly, you know full well there are a couple of things in play. Oregon could just lose, and they could drop themselves out of this thing, or Ohio State still got Michigan. Ohio State still got Michigan State. Ohio State may still have a Big Ten championship game. So they have several bits of criteria, data points, if you will, still coming up to where if they clear all the hurdles, you're going to be able to look at that camera, if you're that committee member, and you're going to be able to say, yes, true enough, and this would be in December if this were said, yes, true enough, Oregon did beat Ohio State. But that only comes into play, that head-to-head metric, if we're in a tiebreaker scenario. At the end of the day, this is how it would sound, it's probably already written in a script somewhere, we thought Ohio State overcame the necessity for us to even interject that head-to-head metric. Okay, that will happen down the stretch, which brings me to my next question about Oregon. They're at number 4. They should feel really good about that. Everyone wants to know if the ceiling has been placed on Cincinnati, and I'll touch on that in a second. Look, I want to know what the ceiling is on Oregon. Because Oregon, as much as you feel good about being there in that 4 spot right now, I don't know that Oregon controls their own destiny, which is kind of counterintuitive if you go by past initial rankings that we've had put out there. Normally, if you are a Power 5 team and you're still in the race for your conference title and whatnot, and you're put there in the top 4, normally it means you control your own destiny. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case with Oregon. So as much as Oregon looks good there at number 4 right now, they probably still need some folks behind them to start losing. That rearview mirror situation right now, though, it's kind of ridiculous. There's some really good teams back there, which brings me to really the biggest takeaway I had, and that is I wonder how many of these teams really control their own destiny. Sure, we can say it about Georgia. We can say it about Bama. We can say it about Michigan State. Good for the Spartans. They're at number 3. I don't know that we can say it about Oregon. I do know we can say it about Ohio State. We, at the moment, cannot say it about Cincinnati. We can say it about Michigan. And by control your own destiny, I mean like if you win the rest of your games, I will virtually guarantee that you're in the playoff no matter what happens elsewhere. Either because your resume will be one of the 4 best, or because in process of finishing undefeated, you have beaten teams in front of you and knocked them out. I think Oklahoma certainly controls their own destiny. But then there's this interesting gap, because I don't think Wake does, and I'm in the minority, I think, on that. What do you guys think about this? I'd be interested to see the comments. I'm a believer, as I've told you for a few weeks now, that Wake is this year's G5 team. Even though they're in a Power 5 conference, even though they could go undefeated. For the record, I don't think they will. think they may lose as early as this weekend against North Carolina, where they are an underdog, point spread-wise, by the way. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say Wake were to go undefeated. Would they be in? That's an undefeated conference champ, Power 5. It's never been left out before. I think this would be the first time that you could see that. Because I'm telling you unequivocally, I'm not putting Wake in, nor is that committee putting Wake in above Bama or Georgia if Bama wins in Atlanta. So those two are in. Michigan State or Michigan, for instance, if they were to win out, they're going to be in. And I'm telling you, I don't think Wake's going over Oregon. Especially, let's just say Ohio State were to win out and Oregon wins out. Ohio State's going. Oregon's a Pac-12 champ with a win on the road against one of the playoff teams. They're going. Wake's not automatically in this just because they're an undefeated Power 5. And I'm telling you, that's hard to process for you because you've never heard that before. I'm telling you for the first time, we're sitting in a unique situation where a Power 5 team could get the G5 door slammed in their face treatment. Now, for the record, Cincinnati is also in a position where that could happen to them. I'm going to talk about Cincy more in just a second. But here's what I want to talk about. Let's get out of the top 10 for a second. Let's go all the way past Notre Dame. Let's go all the way past even Oklahoma State. May you start with Oklahoma State. This 11 through 15, what stands out to you about this? For the record, if you're listening on pod, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Auburn, A&M, and Brigham Young. I specifically want to focus on 11, 12, and 13. Could every single one of those teams still have a reasonable path to the playoff? Oklahoma State and Baylor, they both still got Oklahoma. In a theoretical scenario, if they just keep winning, both of them would have a shot in the Big 12 championship game. So they're already fairly highly ranked. They would have very impressive wins down the road. So I think Oklahoma State and Baylor, they're way off your radar. I mean, Baylor's got Oklahoma coming into town next week if they can get past TCU Saturday. And they're about a touchdown favorite on the road, and the model really likes TCU for the record. If they could get past the Horned Frogs, that sets up a showdown in Waco. And I don't know how many times those three words in succession have come out of my mouth, but showdown in Waco we may very well have this time next week. And I've never been to a game in Waco. So let me put that little tease out there. I've had a flat tire in Waco this year. I have never been to a football game in Waco. And I would like for one of those things never happen again and the other to happen for the first time. Could I please direct your attention to the team ranked 13th right now? That would be the Auburn Tigers. Auburn's 6-2. A lot of you dismiss them wholesale because the two-loss teams never made the playoff. I think it's very foolish to assume that we have a natural border on everything that could ever happen with just 7-year sample size. You know, it could be that in the 9th year of something we could see a first, or in the 14th year we could see a first. Obviously, a two-loss team is eventually going to get in here. I was talking to Colin as he and I were watching this happen. We were watching it happen real time. And I looked and I said, Colin, I think. And I said, hold on. Colin, I really think. Hold on, let me gather my thoughts again. Colin, yeah. I think Auburn controls their own destiny. And you know what? I'm right. If the Auburn Tigers win the remainder of their games, they will be in the playoff. And I don't care who they have to kick out of the way to put Auburn in the playoff. Yeah, they'd have 2 losses. You know who else they would have beaten? Down the stretch, they would have beaten number 14 A&M on the road. They would have beaten number 2 Alabama in Jordan-Hare. And they would have gone to Atlanta and beaten number 1. If you think in your right mind that that team's going to beat 14, 2, and 1 with the impressive resume they already have and get left out, I don't care if they have 2 losses, guys. Auburn controls their own destiny. Auburn controls their destiny more than some of these teams in the top 10. I actually think Auburn controls their destiny more than undefeated Wake Forest does. Now, you make sense of that as you will, because you think apples to apples, they're both Power 5 teams. It's not apples to apples, because the ACC this year is not a Power 5 conference. I know what the helmet sticker says, I know what the TV check says, and I know what history says. I also know what these eyeballs say. Your most impressive win to date is on the road at Virginia. Let me hit you with some knowledge about the ACC. You tell me what these odds would have been in the preseason. If I tell you we are going to get to November and the first playoff rankings are going to come out, and there are going to be 3 ACC teams ranked in the top 25, and neither of them are going to be named Clemson or North Carolina. And Sam Howell will still be healthy, and DJ Uiagalelei will still be healthy. No quarterback injuries, no derailment of a season because of quarterback. Neither one of them are going to be there because they just weren't good enough. How stunning would that have been? That is the state of the ACC this year. Now, you may say, oh, there are still ACC teams up there. Yeah, there are. NC State's in there. Pitt's in there. I would just ask you, is that a byproduct of the inferiority among the perceived top two at the beginning of the season? I would suggest yes, it is. So I don't know that Wake controls their own destiny. I actually think Auburn, out of all teams, down there at number 13, I think they do. So what do we think about Cincinnati here? I was laughing. I knew what was coming. So I thought Cincy would be ranked 4. They were ranked 6. I don't really care. I was laughing. And I still am, as you can see if you're watching, at all the outrage. And I had a lot of people hitting me up saying, I guess you were wrong, weren't you? No, I don't know that I was. I mean, it has happened before. For the record, if anyone's saying I'm wrong, what they are insinuating, or referencing at least, is I have sat here for several weeks, the whole season really, and I've told you I believe if Cincinnati goes undefeated, they will be in the playoff. I haven't said they control their own destiny. What I have said is there are two things in play. Number one, if they go undefeated, they'll have a good enough resume where if the second thing happens that I expect to happen, pay close attention to this one, kids, and that is chaos in November, I think enough of the dominoes will fall ahead of them to where they can get in. The first thing, they got to take care of business on. The second thing, that's what has me laughing. There are no, well, outside of Georgia, and maybe even including Georgia, there are no transcendently elite teams in college football this year. I don't think we have a single one. To assume after an October full of chaos and a September full of chaos that we're going to arrive in this sea of tranquility in November when the stakes are the highest and teams are the most vulnerable and there's the least margin for error and we've got young quarterbacks all over the place on these contending teams. If you think that all these teams, all this chalk is going to cruise right through Thanksgiving and beyond, I think you're kidding yourself. Cincinnati may also fall victim to what I'm talking about here, but certainly I would bet a lot of money that sometimes out of necessity because they'll play each other, but other times just out of the stakes in play and the relative vulnerability of some of these top teams, there will be more huge upsets. You may not have even seen the biggest upsets of the year yet. So if Cincinnati goes undefeated, you look right now and you say, well, you see that team, and that team ahead of them. That means that we've seen the ceiling of Cincinnati. Yeah, if all those teams win out, you have. Who told you they're going to win out? Not me. I don't think they're going to. I think you're going to see several of those teams fall. Several meaning more than one. So I think more than one of them are going to fall. So those are the initial playoff thoughts here. Biggest surprise, Oklahoma. And I think the other surprise to me, and maybe I just had to see it for it to register with me, I really think Auburn controls their destiny. I think that's my other biggest takeaway. I think an undefeated Power 5 in the top 10 does not, and I think a 2-loss Auburn at 13 does. So that's where I am on that.